Why Kant's one rule is misunderstood by most people. What if I told you that living a good life and ethical life could be boiled down to one rule? One principle so profound, so universal, that it applies to every decision, every action, and every relationship you'll ever have. Sounds too simple, right? But that's exactly what Immanuel Kant believed. He gave us what he called the categorical imperative, a single moral law that almost no one fully understands, even though it has the power to completely transform the way we live. And here's the shocking part: most of us are either misusing it or outright ignoring it. Why? Because we've misunderstood what it's really asking of us. Kant's categorical imperative is not your average moral rule. It's not like the golden rule, which tells you to treat others the way you want to be treated. It's not about maximizing happiness or avoiding pain. It's something much deeper, much harder, and much more powerful. It's about acting in a way that respects the very core of what it means to be human. Kant believed that every single one of us has something sacred inside of us: our ability to reason, to think for ourselves, and to make choices. And this rule, it's about honoring that in ourselves and in everyone else. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Here's how it works. Kant's one rule boils down to this: act only according to that maxim by which you can, at the same time that it should become a universal law. Okay, take a moment to let that sink in. What does it mean? Let's break it down. Kant is asking you to think about the principles behind your actions, the reasons why you do what you do. And then he's asking you to imagine a world where everyone acts according to those same principles. Would that world work? Would it be good? If the answer is no, then your action isn't moral. It's as simple and as complicated as that. For example, imagine you're thinking about lying to get out of trouble. The principle behind your action might be something like, it's okay to lie when it benefits me. Now, ask yourself what would happen if everyone followed that rule. If lying was universally acceptable, trust would completely collapse. No one would believe anything anyone says. Communication would break down and society would fall apart. So, according to Kant, lying in this situation isn't just bad for the person you're lying to, it's bad for everyone. It's the kind of action that, if universalized, would destroy the very fabric of human relationships.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
But here's where it gets tricky. Most of us don't stop to think about the principles behind our actions. We act out of habit, emotion, or convenience. Kant's rule forces us to slow down and ask ourselves hard questions. Why am I doing this? What would happen if everyone did the same? Am I acting in a way that respects others as rational, autonomous beings? These questions aren't easy. They challenge us to go beyond our instincts, beyond our selfish desires, and to think about the bigger picture. And here's the profound insight that most people miss. Kant isn't just giving us a rule for ethical behavior. He's giving us a way to live with dignity, integrity, and respect for ourselves and for others. To follow the categorical imperative is to see yourself as part of something larger than your own wants and needs. It's about recognizing that your actions don't exist in a vacuum. Every choice you make echoes out into the world, shaping the kind of reality we all share. But let's be honest, this isn't easy. Kant's rule asks us to act not out of emotion or self-interest, but out of principle. It demands that we hold ourselves to the highest standard, even when no one else is watching, even when it's inconvenient, even when it hurts. And that's why most people misunderstand it. They see it as rigid, impractical, or overly idealistic. But what they're missing is that this rule isn't about perfection, it's about striving. It's about trying every day to live in a way that you can truly stand behind. a way that you'd be proud to see reflected in the world. Ask yourself this: how often do you think about the principles behind your actions? How often do you stop and ask, what kind of world am I creating with this choice? These aren't questions we like to ask because they force us to confront the uncomfortable truth that we're responsible for more than just ourselves. But Kant believed that this responsibility is what makes us human. It's what gives our lives depth and meaning. In the next part, we'll dive deeper into the practical side of the categorical imperative. We'll look at how it applies to real-life situations and why it's not as rigid or abstract as you might think. Because Kant's one rule isn't just a lofty idea, it's a tool for navigating the messy, complicated reality of being human. And once you understand how to use it, it might just change the way you see everything. Living the Rule: How Kant's Ethics Shape Everyday Choices. The brilliance of Kant's one rule isn't just in its logic, it's in how practical it becomes once you understand it. At first glance, the categorical imperative can feel abstract, even overwhelming. You might be thinking, how am I supposed to turn every single decision into some universal moral calculation? But here's the thing: Kant's rule isn't about making life harder, it's about making it clearer. It's a compass that points you toward living authentically and ethically, even in the most ordinary situations. Let's bring this down to earth. Imagine a common dilemma: you're late for work, and there's no one at the crosswalk. The street is empty. Do you jaywalk? It's such a small thing, right? But Kant would ask you to consider the principle behind your choice. If you jaywalk, the maxim might be something like, it's okay to break the rules when it's convenient for me now. Universalize that. What if everyone followed this rule? Traffic laws would lose their meaning. Chaos would ensue, and the structures that keep people safe would collapse. So even in this tiny decision, Kant would argue that crossing the street illegally undermines the very system that allows people to coexist peacefully. This is where the categorical imperative challenges us. It forces us to think about the ripple effects of our actions. It's not about whether jaywalking feels harmless at the moment, it's about whether the principle behind it holds up when applied universally. And here's the deeper insight: the way we act in small, seemingly insignificant moments reflects our character. If you cut corners on the little things, what does that say about how you approach the bigger ones? But let's flip the script. What about decisions that feel deeply personal, where no one else seems to be affected? For instance, imagine you're tempted to cheat on a test. You tell yourself, it's just one test, it doesn't hurt anyone, and I need a good grade to move forward. On the surface, this seems like a victimless act. But again, think about the principle behind it. It's okay to cheat if it benefits me. If everyone followed that logic, the entire concept of fairness would crumble. Trust in education and merit would erode. And on a personal level, you've also reduced yourself to someone who prioritizes short-term gain over integrity. Kant's rule reminds us that even when no one else is looking, our actions matter. They shape who we are and the kind of world we're building. But here's the part that most people misunderstand about Kant: his ethics aren't about being rigid or joyless. He's not asking you to live like a robot, constantly running moral calculations. Instead, he's asking you to cultivate a mindset, a way of seeing the world where you recognize the weight of your choices. It's not about perfection. It's about striving to live in a way that respects both your humanity and the humanity of others. This respect is crucial. Kant's one rule isn't just about universalizing principles, it's about treating people as ends in themselves, never as mere means to an end. What does that mean? It means valuing every person, including yourself, as inherently worthy. Imagine you're a manager at work and you have the power to exploit your employees for profit. You could justify it by saying, it's just business, or everyone does it, but Kant would challenge you to see your employees as more than tools for success. They're people with their own hopes, dreams, and dignity. To use them as mere instruments for your goals is to deny their humanity and yours. This idea is deeply transformative. It shifts the way we see others and ourselves. Suddenly, relationships become less about what we can get and more about what we can give. Decisions become less about convenience and more about integrity. And life, in all its complexity, becomes an opportunity to act in ways we can be proud of, not because someone else is watching, but because we are. Ask yourself, how often do you treat people as ends in themselves? How often do you pause to consider the principles behind your actions? These aren't easy questions, but they're the ones that define who you are. Kant's rule isn't meant to make life simple, it's meant to make it meaningful. In the next part, we'll explore why Kant's moral philosophy feels so counterintuitive in today's world. We live in a time of quick fixes, shortcuts, and moral relativism. But Kant's one rule offers a timeless antidote, a way to live with clarity, purpose, and respect in a world that often encourages the opposite. Why Kant's rule feels radical in a world of shortcuts. Let's be honest, we live in a world that often celebrates convenience over principle. Think about it, everything around us is designed to make life easier, faster, and more efficient. Need something? Buy it in one click. Facing conflict? Ghost the person instead of addressing it. Want success? Take the shortcut, even if it means bending the rules. It's no surprise that Kant's moral philosophy feels counterintuitive in this kind of world. His one rule demanding that we act only in ways that could be universalized and that respect humanity in others clashes directly with a culture that often prioritizes me over we. Why does Kant's rule feel so radical today? Because it doesn't allow for excuses. It doesn't let us hide behind everyone's doing it, or it's harmless if no one notices. It forces us to confront the uncomfortable truth. Every decision we make reflects the kind of person we are and the kind of world we're contributing to. And let's face it, that's not an easy pill to swallow. We want to believe that small moral lapses don't matter, or that we can cut corners when it's convenient without it defining us. But Kant challenges this. He reminds us that morality isn't situational. It's not a game of weighing pros and cons to see what benefits us most. It's about principles unshakable, universal principles that don't bend to fit our desires. Take the concept of lying, for example. In today's world, we've normalized so many forms of dishonesty. White lies, half-truths, omission, they're all part of how we navigate social and professional life. We justify it by saying, I'm trying to avoid conflict, or it's for their own good, but Kant would view this differently. To him, lying, no matter how small, violates the trust that makes human relationships possible. If everyone lied whenever it was convenient, trust would erode entirely, and without trust, society itself begins to crumble. Kant's rule feels especially challenging because it demands that we think long-term in a world obsessed with instant gratification. It's not just about whether an action benefits you right now, it's about whether the principle behind it could sustain a better world for everyone over time. This shift in perspective is hard. It forces us to look beyond ourselves and our immediate circumstances. It forces us to think about the collective, about the kind of humanity we're fostering through our actions, and in a culture that glorifies individualism, that can feel like a radical act. But here's where Kant's philosophy becomes deeply empowering. It gives us clarity in a world full of moral gray areas. When faced with a tough decision, we don't have to overanalyze or justify ourselves endlessly. We simply have to ask, what's the principle behind my action? Can I imagine a world where everyone acts this way? Am I treating others and myself with the respect that human dignity deserves? This clarity can cut through the noise of modern life, grounding us in a sense of purpose and integrity. Ask yourself, how often do you choose convenience over principle? How often do you justify actions that, deep down, you know wouldn't hold up if universalized? These questions aren't easy. They force us to confront habits we'd rather ignore. But that's what makes Kant's philosophy so powerful. It pushes us to grow, to think beyond ourselves, and to strive for something greater. In the final part, we'll explore how to actually live Kant's one rule in the chaos of modern life. But from relationships to work to the choices we make every day, we'll look at how this timeless philosophy can guide us toward a life of integrity, respect, and meaning. How to live Kant's one rule in a world that pulls you away. Living by Kant's one rule, the categorical imperative, isn't just a thought experiment. It's a daily practice, one that can guide us through the messiness of modern life. But let's be real, sticking to such a demanding principle in a world full of distractions, temptations, and cultural pressures is incredibly hard. Every day, we're pulled in 1,000 directions. We're told to prioritize success over integrity, convenience over consistency, and self-interest over collective good. So how do we take Kant's lofty ideal and make it a compass we can actually follow? The first step is to slow down. We live in a culture of speed, where decisions are made in an instant and reflection feels like a luxury. But Kant's philosophy requires us to pause and think. When you're faced with a choice, big or small, take a moment to ask yourself, why am I doing this? What's the principle behind my action? Would I endorse this principle if everyone else followed it? These questions might feel unnatural at first, but over time they become second nature. And here's the thing, even if you don't have a perfect answer, the act of questioning itself is transformative. It forces you to live more intentionally, to see your actions as part of something larger than yourself. Next, embrace the discomfort. Kant's philosophy isn't about finding the easiest path, it's about finding the most ethical one. And sometimes the most ethical path is the hardest. It might mean telling the truth when it's inconvenient, or standing up for what's right when it would be easier to stay silent. It might mean sacrificing short-term gains for long-term integrity. These moments are uncomfortable because they challenge us to rise above our instincts and habits. But they're also the moments that define us. They're where we prove to ourselves, not to anyone else, that we're committed to living a life of principle. One of the most powerful ways to live Kant's rule is by rethinking how we treat others. Kant believed that every person is an end in themselves, not a means to an end. This is a radical idea, especially in a world that often reduces people to tools, obstacles, or opportunities. To live this principle means seeing the humanity in everyone you encounter: the colleague who frustrates you, the stranger who cuts you off in traffic, even the people you deeply disagree with. It's about asking, am I treating this person as a human being with inherent worth, or am I using them to serve my own goals? This shift in perspective can completely change the way we approach relationships, conflict, and community. But let's be clear, living Kant's rule doesn't mean being perfect. It's not about never making mistakes or always having the right answer. It's about striving. It's about aiming to act in a way that you can respect, even when you fall short. Kant wasn't naive. He knew humans are flawed. What matters is the effort, the willingness to reflect, to question, and to try again. Morality, for Kant, isn't about achieving some ideal state. It's about the journey, the constant striving to live in a way that honors both your dignity and the dignity of others. Finally, remember this: living according to the categorical imperative isn't just about making ethical decisions, it's about creating meaning. In a world where so much seems arbitrary or fleeting, Kant's philosophy offers us a way to anchor ourselves. It reminds us that our choices matter, not because they're being judged by some higher power, but because they shape who we are and the kind of world we leave behind. So, ask yourself, what kind of person do you want to be? What kind of world do you want to live in? Every choice you make, every principle you follow adds a brushstroke to the bigger picture. The question is, will that picture reflect the values you believe in? Kant's rule isn't easy, it's not meant to be. But in its difficulty lies its power. It challenges us to rise above convenience, selfishness, and short-term thinking. It asks us to live with integrity, to respect the humanity in ourselves and others, and to create a life we can truly stand behind. That's the gift of the categorical imperative, a gift that, once understood, can transform not just how we act, but how we see ourselves and the world around us.